Okay, so what is Techstars, right? I run the Music Accelerator, but Techstars is a global network to help entrepreneurs succeed. It's not just the music program. Let me see if I can flip it. Yeah, so, okay, what is Techstars? One more, there you go. A worldwide network to help entrepreneurs succeed. We run accelerator programs. We have a $400 million venture fund. We also own and operate Startup Weekend and Startup Week, which are community-driven, community-organized events around exposing people to entrepreneurship and startup culture. So you could think of it as sort of an inverted pyramid. At the top biggest level, you've got Startup Weekend and Startup Week. I have an idea for an app, or I have an idea for a piece of software or a company. How do I meet people who can do that with me? How do I learn about how that works? How do I learn about funding? How do I learn about technical management, all that stuff? That's a community-driven, sort of volunteer-led organization. Then you come down that pyramid a little bit, and you have our accelerator programs. So about 1% of the people who go through Startup Weekend and Startup Week are eligible and talented enough and skilled enough and have interesting enough concepts to become companies we invest in, right? And those investments happen through our accelerator programs, which I'll talk more about in a second. And then below that, we have our venture fund who co-invests. They don't lead rounds, but they invest in the alumni of our accelerator programs. And that's a fund of about $400 million run by an entirely separate venture partner team. This is our portfolio. We are very transparent about it. If you go to techstars.com, you can see all the companies that have ever come through our accelerator programs. You can see how much capital they've raised. You can see whether they are still operating or not, whether they've been acquired or failed. You can also see which program they came through and when, right? So you can sort of gauge each vintage and each program around the world. And so here's kind of how it breaks down. There's about 1,100 companies. These numbers are a little bit out of date. About 1,100 companies that have come through our programs, 88% of which active or acquired, right? You can see sort of the full breakdown there. Part of the reason for that is that we've grown so rapidly over the last 4 or 5 years, so there's a lot more new companies in our portfolio than old companies. But it is also true that our portfolio companies outperform the market. By way of example, our friends at SendGrid, who are happy to be here tonight and are so helpful with their Startup Accelerator programs. SendGrid, Techstars Boulder class of 2009. It will be our first IPO, I think, out of our portfolio. If I'm not telling a secret, I'm not supposed to tell. Other companies that have come through that: DigitalOcean, Localytics, Sphero. Right? Everybody in here likes Star Wars? Nobody. This is a safe place, nerds. So this is a safe room. It's okay. So anybody have a BB-8 that you can drive around? BB-8 droid? That's Sphero. That came through 2 of our programs, actually. It's one of the only companies that do 2 Techstars accelerator programs. They went through our Boulder program, where they transformed from being a robotic garage door opener into robot toys for kids. And then they went through our program that we ran with Disney in 2014 in LA, where they got access to Disney IP and became BB-8, which is pretty cool. Okay, so what is Techstars Music? Here you go. Here's what Techstars Music is. It's an accelerator program, but it's a vertically focused accelerator, right? So whereas Techstars Boulder, where SendGrid came from, is a geographically based program, or Techstars Adelaide, which is running in Adelaide right now, is more of a geographically and topic-based program, a lot of defense work and stuff that comes out of the local industry there. Our program is global. So we recruit around the planet. We're looking for the 10 most interesting startups in music anywhere they arise. Like wherever they're from, that's what we're interested in. So we recruit all over the place. Techstars LA doesn't recruit in Australia, right? Companies from Australia might apply to Techstars LA and have a reason why they want to be in our Los Angeles geography-based program, care about the LA ecosystem, care about access to the American market. But that program doesn't come here looking for companies in the way that the music program does, right? We also run a mobility program in Detroit around the future of personal mobility, and they recruit the planet, as you would expect. But we also don't do this alone. So one of the surefire ways to get in trouble in music, especially technically, is to go about things unilaterally and not in cooperation with the existing music business, right? Plenty of blog posts online. Just do a little search for David Pakman. He's particularly grumpy about the topic, about the number of dead music startups on the road because they failed to interact with or collaborate with existing industry. So we actually take the thesis level approach, meaning that part of our how we think we're going to earn return for our investors is by collaborating with the music business. So as you can see, we've built a consortium of major planetary music companies who both fund our program and invest with us and help us select companies and nurture them and mentor them in our office in Los Angeles. Sony Music, Q Prime, Warner Music, Harmonix, Silva Artist Management, Bill Silva Entertainment, right? These are some of the most highly leveraged companies in music, and they can both open doors and test products and validate companies in ways that we can't on the venture side, and we can validate companies technically and organizationally and from a venture perspective in ways that they can't. And if you put those two things together, that's quite a bit of leverage to send a company out into the market for future fundraising. And what's interesting about that is even already with only one version of this program under our belts, that evidence there's evidence that that's true, right? So companies that have come through our program, it started last February 20th, something like that, have raised about $14 million to date since the start of the program, which is a pretty good number considering there's 3 or 4 companies that still have open rounds that are going to be larger than the rounds that have closed to date. So the big rounds are still sort of hanging out there. Okay, so what does a startup get who's in our program that we invest in, right? We invest on fixed terms because it's an accelerator. So our programs work this way. We invest $20,000 for 6 points of common and the program. That 6 points of common is at risk to us, right? We operate on what's called an equity back guarantee. So if you come to our program, you give us 6 points of common, we give you $20,000. We'll talk about the 100K, which is on a convertible note in a second. That's optional. You can take that or not take that. But you have to take our 20K and you have to give us 6 points. We don't negotiate that. There's no deal at 3. There's no deal at 2 or 4 or whatever. You got to give us all 6, but that all 6 is at risk. So at the end of the program, if you tell us, hey, my company is not now 6, 8, 10, 20, 50, 100% more valuable than it was at the beginning of the program, you give us back our 20K, we'll give you back your 6 points. There's also $100,000 on a convertible note, a little bit different. You take that. That's a debt instrument, right? We can talk about convertible notes afterwards if you're curious how those work. Obviously not at risk, that's not how debt works. But it's optional. We don't force you to take it. If you don't want it, you don't have to take it. What's interesting about this is that it creates an environment where everyone is equal, right? So in the last cohort, we had entrepreneurs like Stephen, who certainly don't need my $120,000, and entrepreneurs like Lars Rasmussen, who is one of the co-creators of Google Maps here in Sydney, actually, of all places, which is pretty cool. And we also had, the Adam McIsaac from Robin running his first ever company out of Toronto. Everybody had the same deal. Everybody surrendered the same equity. Everybody's in the same boat during the program, and it creates a collegial, vulnerable family atmosphere that's actually really useful and bonds those companies together for a really long time. All the companies in our program must come to Los Angeles. They co-locate out of our office. It's not something where you can do remotely. So if you are a Sydney-based company and we invite you to be part of the program, you're going to pack up and move to Los Angeles from February to May of the spring, and you'll be there with us. And the reason we do that is it allows us to bring mentors and executives and investors, and it creates critical mass and a reason for us to bring people to you, right? The goal of being in that program is do a year's worth of work in 3 months. How does it work? There's sort of 3 phases of our accelerator programs. The first part is mentor engagement and feedback. So in the music program, there are 205 to 225, depending on who's in town and what's going on. Mentors, they're executives from Facebook, Google, Twitter, Instagram, you name it, Microsoft, Bose, Sonos, Harmonix, right? The member companies, Universal, Live Nation, Ticketmaster, sort of a who's who of music and tech. And those mentors engage with all of the companies like crazy for the first 5 or 6 weeks of the program. So we're questioning strategy, we're questioning business model, we're finding out if your product is viable, finding out if your product could be used for a marketing campaign or would be useful to one of the member companies as them being your customer, or maybe they become your investor, right? As happened a couple of times in the program last year. But that concentrated period of time is designed to help you really road test both the way you talk about your company, the strategy of that company, and the things that are most important for you to accomplish. In the second phase, the execution and rapid iteration, it's about taking the doors that have been opened in the first phase, right? Sort of now that you're pointed in the right direction, and capitalizing on that. What is it that you can do during this month, 4 or 5 weeks, where you can actually go out and show progress and show that, hey, I came here, I met these people, we changed my strategy a little bit, we tweaked it, or hey, we passed their test to use our product in their marketing campaign, and now we're going to go and execute that, so we can turn around and tell investors, hey, look how this works. Here's some traction. Here's some evidence of product market fit with people in my category. And then the final month is preparation for fundraising. So it's about, hey, we have a big demo day event. We brought in last year 105 venture investors from all over the planet. That included angels and institutions. And they watched 5-minute presentations from all of the companies. We also, during that last month, make sure that your business model and your org chart and your investor deck and your pitch presentation all tell the same story, right? My guess is there's a bunch of startups in here who have pro forma models, and you have investor pitch decks, and you have org charts, and you have P&Ls, and those 4 documents probably don't tell the same story, right? Or they create questions around the story. We spend a lot of time making sure those things are aligned and prepared, so you go out in the market for future fundraising, and you're successful. And across the system, there's evidence that is true and does work. Of all of the Series A rounds in the world, just under 5%, 4.9% of them go to Techstars alumni. So that number is higher and better than any accelerator program anywhere on the planet. That there's no other accelerator that can match that number. Okay, so what do we invest in? We invest in companies solving problems for music. I like to say it this way: we don't invest in music companies. So that means we don't invest in companies that are labels, create content or market it, or manage artists, right? We're not investing in music companies. We're investing in technology, right? We're venture investors. We're investing in startups solving problems for music. It also means that if you were creating a software startup that's about delivering music and requires a full catalog license, it better be really, 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 really awesome, right? The economics of a full catalog license are still TBD, right? Then it's hard for us to invest in that. So a lot of times people hear, oh, Techstars Music, how are you going to find 10 companies that are music startups that are worth investing in? And the reason for that is we say it's easy because we're investing in e-commerce companies, and we're investing in crowd safety, right? And event safety. Like, how do we keep 60,000 people safe if they're all assembled somewhere? How do we communicate in crowds? Rights and royalties. How do we track, distribute, move, and flow funds? Right. There's a lot of innovation in that space over the next 4 or 5 years. Like a lot been in the last 2 years, but there's a lot more to come in the next 4 or 5. Music education. How do we teach kids music? Right. We still, at least in the U.S., we're still teaching kids how to be part of the big band. There isn't a single 7th grader in the world who cares about playing the oboe. Show me one. Like, prove it. Right. Like, and yet we've got a bunch of 7th graders trying to learn how to play oboe and clarinet. Kids make music with buttons and keys. We should be teaching them music that they like and care about. It gives them social capital and makes them feel like they're part of the planet. So we'll look and invest in that. We'll invest in artist discovery, right? There is an incredible supply of content, right? One of the problems of music is sort of unlimited supply. How do we curate it? How do we pick? How do we find things that are worth investing in? How do we find things that are viable products? How do we know ahead of time what's going to be interesting and what isn't? And how do we make things that people care about? How do we deliver them in ways that they like? And then content delivery and infrastructure, right? How do we make the content work, right? One of the great drivers of subscription streaming that never gets written about is the penetration of LTE. Right? If you look at the global penetration curve for LTE and broadband access on mobile devices, it looks pretty highly correlated to the rise of subscription streaming. The Spotify product of right now is really great. It's a perfected 1.0 product, but it's not that different than the Rhapsody product of 10 years ago, right? It's maybe 15% better, 20% better. But the fact that we have LTE in our pockets makes a dramatic difference on the viability of those products, right? So investing in infrastructure and content delivery and the way we deliver things to people and the way people access it, that stuff matters to us, and those are interesting investments for us and very technical. And then we invest in new music experiences, right? In the current class, so 2017, last year's program. We had Lars's company Weave. They make adaptive music. That's a new music experience. It's music that's remixed on the fly based on your biometrics. So if you're running down the street, you're going for a run, listening to music, every foot falls on the beat. All of your action and your heart rate and your intensity is driving the way the music is synced to your activity. And then finally, as a way of a segue, Stephen looks at me like, shut up. Machine learning and AI, which brings us to our conversation tonight.